Tillman Jr., Amandla Stenberg, and Shaniqua McClendon.
Sit down. They listened.
I was going to say, could we give them another round of applause, but or we can just do it again. So I just want to say,
Switch places.
What?
Right.
Okay.
There you go. There you go.
whatever works.
Yeah.
So I want to say thank you. Well, thank you for being here, obviously, but thank you for the movie. I mean, I saw it twice, once when it came out, and then once again to prepare for this conversation. And, you know, it was hard to watch, but it meant so much. Like, so many parts resonated in a personal way, but then also with everything that's going on in this country. So just thank you, and, you know, here's my applause for you. And so I know you've answered this question probably 10 million times, but it has to be my first question. George, could you talk a little bit about why you wanted to make this movie? And Amandla, if you could speak a little bit about why it was important for you to play Starr, and maybe personally what that meant to you.
I think for me, as a director, you know, just working in the industry, you always want to try to find something that you can sort of connect with. I always have a hard time trying to find things that I really love, that I feel like, because you've taken pretty much 18, 19 months of your life of directing, from casting to production and all the way to marketing and all that. So I just felt really connected. Something just spoke with me with the book. The first chapter, Starr walks into the party, and red light, she's with her best friend in this neighborhood. And she says, you know, that line is, "I don't know is enough to be me at this party." And I really was able to identify just with the character having identification issues in the neighborhood, and how that is challenged when Khalil is shot, and how that completely changed her life. And I just thought it was an interesting character, interesting family. My father gave me the talk very early, and so this is something I was just emotionally connected to.
Yeah, for me, it all started with the book by Angie Thomas, which just blew my mind open. Angie often says when she talks about the book that she created it for the kids in her neighborhood, and that she made it for the kids who maybe don't always have something to connect to, don't have a book to read. And oftentimes we do that work of cross-identifying, and she wanted to ensure that we don't always have to do that, because being validated is so important, you know? And so when I read the book, I was so moved by Starr's experience of code switching, of navigating these different environments and having to comport herself differently in those spaces. And then, of course, I was so moved by how Angie took these events, which have become so painful to really critically delve into, that we often kind of become desensitized to them. I was moved by how she took that and placed it in such a personal narrative that was so heartwarming and so powerful, and allowed us, through the book, the space to actually be able to process some of these feelings, and see ourselves and be empowered, even though it's kind of a painful exercise. And so I immediately fell in love with it, and I was really lucky because I got my hands on an early copy of the manuscript of the book, and there was a lot of buzz around it already, and so studios were already looking at optioning it to turn into a film. And I felt like it was everything that I wanted to do as an artist, just in terms of the power that it had to instill empathy in people, the power that it had to be empowering to those who often don't get to be represented, and just also the way that it kind of grounded me and so many others in humanity and in emotion in times that it can become really difficult to do that in.
So you mentioned it being a painful exercise, and this question is for both of you. I think as people go through their everyday lives and they see these events on television, and don't necessarily even experience them personally, it affects them. So how was it to actually be making this film and having to go through this and somewhat like voluntarily subjecting yourself to this? Did that take a toll on you in any way?
Yeah, it was really challenging. I felt like making this movie was just like one really big exercise in reflecting on Black experience, and delving into those emotions that we so often push past and don't really have the time to allow them to exist and breathe and surface and so that we can let go of them. So I felt like there was a lot of that sort of work being done, of really critically looking at internalized pain, internalized racism, that burden that we so often carry but don't actually have the time to look at and analyze because we have to keep going, we have to keep pushing, we got to keep moving. And so sometimes kind of unearthing all of those feelings was really, really painful, but there was also something really gratifying about it and really healing, because in some ways it was therapeutic. And that was kind of the intention for the film in some ways too, was to create a space where for a few hours someone could sit down, and I'm talking specifically, I guess, to Black communities, but we could sit down, we could look deeply at these problems, look deeply at how they affect us, look deeply at how microaggressions affect us, affect our self-worth, affect kind of that weight that we're carrying, affect how we conceptualize ourselves, and process them to the point where maybe we could release them a little bit and have a little bit of levity, and have some tools to keep moving, and so hopefully that's what people get from it when it comes to Black communities or people of color or anyone who can relate to some of these experiences, is just they can have a moment of kind of therapeutic release,
How was it for you?
Yeah, it was. For us, it was just a long process of just trying to get things, right in terms of like the final scene, the uprising of the community and the Khalil shooting. I remember that was a very emotional time for us. Just 2 days, and it wasn't a lunch break. We just kept it going. I just kept it the whole way through, just so Amandla can be in the same space through that long period of time. But for everyone, it was a family experience, from the whole family of the Carter family spending time together, and Starr in the rehearsals with Khalil, that relationship. We never really rehearsed the shooting. We just really built the relationship of what it's really like for two people who grew up as childhood friends and developing the chemistry. So a lot of that time was spent. So all that was just having an experience of having a unity together. And during prep, the Philando Castile situation happened in Minnesota, so that was very effective in how we wanted to shoot that scene in terms of getting the experience across, how these things can happen very quickly, and sometimes how do you react to that? How do we come out of that? How do we heal? So that was pretty much the experience that we went through the whole process.
Okay. So now actually diving into the film a bit, so it opens with Maverick, played by Russell Hornsby, giving the talk to his kids, and they are pretty young in this scene. Was there a specific reason you decided to open with that?
Yeah, I wanted to open up. Originally, that scene is a little bit later in the book, and the first writer who really spent a lot of time on it, Algee Wells, she asked me, "Have you ever had to talk?" And I said, "I had to talk when I was about 10 years old." And it came from various family members, not just my dad, but it came from other uncles. My uncles, they came from the 1968 riots, so they already experienced that, and their relationship with the community, with the police, was completely different. How do you look? How do you survive? How do you just stay quiet? How you stay respectful so you can live another day? Those were the things that was taught to me. And, we felt that a lot of people don't know that experience. That talk mean the birds and the bees for a lot of people. And for African Americans or people of color, that's the birds and the bees in the talk. So we wanted to open up very early on that. And we felt that was very crucial in terms of how Khalil saw he didn't have the talk. His family component was completely different from Starr family component, and that relationship. So we want to show the difference of how a mistake in what you taught can change things.
Yeah, and I think that was really clear. The next kind of time we see the talk come up is not explicitly, but in the scene where Khalil is killed, and you're trying to walk him through everything that your father told you. Sorry, I'm saying this like it's actually your father.
I'm Starr.
But you're trying to walk him. Starr is trying to walk him through each step of this and tell him, what her father told her. Could you talk a bit about how you felt, just in that scene at all? And it sounds like you didn't really prepare. It was more so preparation in the relationship. So when you were actually like filming that scene, what that was like, just going through that experience.
Yeah, I think it was just about being as present as possible. Obviously there was very tangible prep work I could do for that sort of scene in terms of watching video footage that exists, because we have so much evidence of these events happening, and because of our ability to surveil our experiences now, it's one of the reasons why we can hold police and hold people who are racist accountable. And so, like, I watched those videos. I had already watched them. I think we all have. But it wasn't that much of a reach. I mean, because it's real experiences. And so I think really just shooting that scene was about being present. There definitely were moments where I think for both me and Algee, our hearts really were racing, either because we had been in similar, we had gone through similar things or been in similar situations. But yeah, I think George did a really great job of setting up the parameters of the scene so that the actor who played the police officer we didn't actually interact with until the scene. We didn't talk to him in between takes. And we just tried to show up and respond the way that we would, and I guess just be honest.
Yeah. So I have a ton of questions here, but now I'm going to jump around a bit because of something you just said about for different people, the talk means different things. And in the Black community, it includes a conversation about how you interact with police. As you were making this movie, were you considering how different audiences would take different messages out of this? And did you intend for different audiences to have different messages, or what was your thinking around that?
No, I really just kept it. I didn't think about that at all. I always felt like that this family was so strong. Everybody can be able to identify with family. And when I first met Amandla, because she read the book early, and I read the book early, so I had to meet her. So when I met her, just looking at her, and I just felt like immediately you want to hug her. You want to take care of her.
That's really nice.
So you care. She has that inside of her. Who, no matter what culture you are in, who would not be able to identify with that? But we felt it was very important to be as honest as possible. A lot of times when we would do a take and we wanted to do it again, it was all about we can be more honest with that. This means true feelings, true honesty, things that would come out. So with Mav having a talk in the room with her, that's a scene that you never really see in film, where an African-American man is explaining the police system and the prison system and how that work and how drugs is being sold and how drugs is being brought into the neighborhood and how he made those mistakes and he's not going to let that happen. I'm going to let that break the cycle. To a certain degree, a lot of people don't have that experience, but my father at the same time never went to college. He's like, I want to break the cycle so you can be able to go to college. So everybody should be able to identify with that. But we want to be very true, and I think audience sometimes can appreciate honesty and where it's coming from. So that's my approach, the way into the material.
Okay. And so there are two other scenes, aside from the police shooting scene, that I wanted to also ask you both about. Amandla, I wanted to ask you about the scene, the one I was trying to get the line from backstage, when you pull the brush out of, yes, Haley, sorry. Sabrina kept popping in my head, and I was like, that's her real name. Out of Haley's book bag, and you ask her, does this look like a weapon, after she's, tried to justify the police officer shooting Khalil. But in that moment, you see an anger that you hadn't seen Starr have with Haley up until this point, even though she's done a lot of things for Starr to get that angry with. What do you think? Why do you think that was kind of a change in her, the way she engaged with her and her character at that moment?
Yeah, so it was really important for us to kind of construct a really solid thread for Starr in terms of how does she compromise herself for others? When does she fully allow herself to be her? When does she stop being Starr version 1 and Starr version 2 and just be her? And I think for a long time, Starr hides her anger, hides some kind of some aspects of herself that are just honest to her, because she's afraid of being called the angry black girl, because she's afraid of being stereotyped, because she's trying to fit in as much as she can. And so what we wanted to do is ensure that there are certain moments where you see her growth and her refusal to stop compromising herself or compromising her feelings, particularly for her white friends, in which she has that kind of contract set with them in their relationship. And I think right before the hairbrush scene is the scene where Starr has that conversation with her uncle around police brutality, and he's, obviously a black cop navigating a really complicated existence. And she's starting to refuse the things that she once accepted. And we thought of that as kind of a catalyst towards her starting to refuse those contracts that she's accepted, in terms of making herself smaller or not letting herself be angry. And so I think, that scene is representative of her getting to the place where if someone says some whack shit to her, she's gonna pop off on them. She's no longer going to be complacent and docile and feel like she has to stuff down all those feelings, because that process of stuffing down all those feelings is so detrimental to her. And so I guess that's what that scene is about. In the book, she actually beats her ass. She fully beats her up. And I think when it came to, and I guess here's the ironic thing, but I guess when it came to this, studio making a movie version of that, it might have been too much for people to see that on screen. And the irony is not lost on me, right? We're not ready to see a black girl beating up a white girl. And here I'm out here talking about Starr not compromising herself. But anyways, I think that George also felt like the metaphor of the brush was more powerful than necessarily seeing Starr beat up Haley, because the brush is obviously a metaphor for what she went through and the reason why Khalil died, and it's about Starr reclaiming that metaphor and then wielding it and leveraging it in the way that she needs to in order to be her most empowered self.
So I'm going to ask you about a different scene, but if you want to add on to that, you can certainly feel free. So at the climax of the movie, the kids get out of the burning store, but then Stakani pulls the gun out of his father's waistband and is pointing it up. And after going through the movie and just crying so much, I really thought that it was going to go downhill from there, but it didn't. But how do you work with someone so young to pull off that scene? And he did it in such an amazing way. I know he's an actor, but when I was that age, I would not have been able to, pull that off in any way. So as a director, what do you do to work with someone that young to pull off a scene so dramatic?
Well, I mean, it started in rehearsals. When I have worked with kids before, so sometimes you try to find talented young actors, and there's so many young kids where their humanity and what they bring is so honest, and they already have it because all the acting classes and all that stuff that you learn, they're not even there. They are really only present in the moment. So I just found a great kid who was a really good actor from the beginning. So what I did was just keep him around the family. And just seeing the family hanging out with these guys and rehearsals, and he was really great at ad-libbing and really improvising, like the scene in the diner when they're talking about the relationship and the family. That's all him, when he talks about, like, I'm scarred for life. That's him doing that on his own. And that's being in the moment because of all the rehearsals that I wanted to set up for everybody. So in that moment, for that scene with the gun, which was a very pivotal moment, and we shot it out of sequence because we had to shoot him because he could only shoot 5 hours a day or 6 hours or something like that. So we had to shoot him, get him done, and shoot some other stuff and come back. But just having a gun in his hand, and I would just whisper a few things for him because I wanted to do a lot of takes. And I would just whisper, keep saying things, and he's just having it all there. And Russell Maverick, who plays Maverick, is an amazing theatrical actor on stage and film, and he just brought it to him as well in terms of yelling at him while I was giving him those moments. And I think he felt that he was not doing a good job. And those tears came down was because he felt like he wasn't doing a good job. He was doing an amazing job. So, and everybody just came around and just hugged him and just told him how great a job he was doing. But that's come from the family and just being a good young actor.
Wow. I mean, when you see him, tell him that, like, he did great.
I think it was just a lot of emotion also for a little kid.
Yeah.
Like, because he's a smart kid. I think he got it. I think he understood the themes.
Yeah.
And Russell, like George was saying, is an amazing scene partner. So, Russell was in it. If he was on camera, if he was off camera, it didn't matter. He would be there to feed lines to us, to kind of give us the fuel to deliver what we needed to deliver. And sometimes I'm like, man, I wonder what all the B-roll is like, because you probably hear Russell saying the wildest shit. Like, he's probably saying, like, that would probably be a film in itself. But he, when I was off camera, or when he was off camera, he would deliver me lines. Even in that scene, I remember that night, I remember him saying things to me like, you did it. You did it. You should be so proud of yourself. You did it. It's over. You can relax now. Like, things like that, to really help us cultivate the real emotion and give it as truthfully as we could.
So now I'm going to ask a question before the larger theme that I want to get at next. But the larger theme I want to get at next are the white characters in the movie. Obviously, a movie about race, that's going to matter a lot. But I did have one question. Was there a purposeful decision as to why Starr didn't have any black friends at Williamson?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted just to make that completely. I actually had that conversation with Angie early on. I really wanted to make that distinction. There's a few black people back there, but not many. Not many. That was based off, too, just when I moved over from my public school over to a white public school. It was just, for some reason, the black kids, we all didn't hang out with each other. You know what I mean? I don't know why we didn't want the white people to know we hang out. It was just weird. So I kept that away a little bit just from that experience. But yeah, that was the reason why that. But for the white characters that you were asking, Sabrina Carpenter and KJ Apa, they were amazing. Like Sabrina Carpenter, the first conversation that we talked about was she would never see herself being this way. She wanted to understand where that was coming from. And that was just based from a lot of research where I was able to narrow it down, that it sort of came from me through television, through parents, and just being in control of the relationship. So just breaking that stuff down, she was able to really see. So when she's at her house or when she's at Maya's house, she's getting all this information through television, how bad the neighborhood where Starr lives in. And seeing the difference of how the media really feed this to individuals, and her having her parents being there and having that information. So that was something that she was able to take very early on. KJ Apple was in a different situation. Coming from another country, he was an actor replacing an actor. We had another actor playing Chris, that we had to go through a tough experience just reshooting because something surfaced up from him from 6 years ago saying a racist comment that came up. So we had to make the decision to replace him completely. And KJ came up in a situation where, wow, I'm the new guy in here. And he did a marvelous job. So that was our experience. So KJ was experienced racism as he came in because he saw one actor get replaced because of that. Yeah. So
I had the same question when I read the book. Like, man, Starr really has no black friends at her school. And the way Angie wrote it is that there's one black boy in her class who's the only other person of color. And I remember like laughing when I read this in the book. And Starr is kind of griping. She's like, man, like everyone tries to, I forget the character's name. She's like, man, everyone tries to put me and him together like on some Noah's Ark type shit. And I'm just trying to live my life, you know? And so I think like, I don't know, me and Angie actually talked about that at one point. I think it's kind of also Starr trying to distance herself from that like weird projection that happens when you're like one of the only people of color in a very white environment, where people try to group you together. Or I had a similar experience to Starr growing up, just going to a school that was really, really white, and there were only a few kids of color in my class. And I remember everyone used to always confuse my name with the name of the other black girl in my class.
That's happened to me.
Oh, we've all been there, and it was really frustrating. I think sometimes the way that we respond to that, especially as kids or teenagers, is to kind of try to put as much distance between us and us as we can sometimes, in order to try to be individual, in order to try to exist outside of that label that feels like really big and ominous. Yeah.
Okay. I just have a couple more questions, and then we will open it up to the audience for questions. So kind of in this same line of questioning, Chris's character, I mentioned this backstage, I kept thinking, oh my gosh, is he going to annoy me? Is he going to be like this, like, you know, I'm down kind of white guy and be annoying? But he wasn't, which was... that was great, but I did have a specific question just about Starr and Chris's relationship, and, you know, maybe I just saw this, so I'm asking you if it was supposed to be there, kind of a bit of a racial labor burden on Starr to kind of make Chris see things, and I'm specifically thinking about the limousine scene where he's like, oh, I don't see color, we're all the same, and then very quickly Starr says, you know, if you can't see my blackness, you can't see me. And then he says, I see you, and everything is fine. So
no,
I guess
it's not.
I guess I have two questions, kind of that racial labor, but then also, was it just, this is a movie, so we have to make this go by quickly in that conversation?
I think it was that.
Okay.
But George,
there's still work to be done.
Okay.
You know, he sees it at the riots. He says, what can I do?
Mm-hmm.
So always looked at it, he's working on it.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between him and, you know,
right.
and Sabrina Carpenter's character. So it just got shortened because of the time length.
That's just the thing I've been wondering about.
I was like kind of aching for that moment too, though. Even when we were working on it, I was like, he's like, I do see you, and then she just moves on. She's like, yes, you do, great. Like I didn't really, you know, it wasn't believable to me either. And we kind of had a little bit of like, we had to work through that when we were doing the scene. I was like, so Starr's supposed to just move on after he hasn't proved anything yet. And George kind of explained to me like, well, he has the chance to prove himself through his actions in the later riot scene, did, yeah. And also it's not tied up in a bow. You know, he is still working on it. We don't know if Starr and Chris are going to be together forever. We don't know if Starr is going to feel truly seen by him, but it's still, I guess, cool to be able to kind of track that relationship shift as he becomes more cognizant.
Yeah. Okay, last question. So the movie ends with King going to jail. But before that, the police officer who killed Khalil is not indicted. And so I'm wondering, with the conclusion of the movie, what is the audience supposed to be left with? And maybe it's not supposed to be a happy ending, but...
Yeah. Well, I think the main thing is being able to stand up and speak up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Starr was able to do that with the police officer.
Yeah.
But the control is out of her hands of what happens, the indictment, or does he get arrested? Does he go to jail? That's the government. Mm-hmm. Not until Chicago, just recently, you know, that really happened for the first time, where an officer shooting was actually, you know, went to prison for that. So Starr did what she had to do, but also there's this thing in the community in terms of, do we speak up among ourselves? In Chicago, one of the times when I was there, it was like 20 murders in one weekend. And that's among ourselves, African Americans. How do we deal with that as well? And I love how Angie was able to put all that together. It's all connected to a certain degree. The police officer is one thing, but also there's gun control as well, and how do we treat one another. So as a filmmaker, I didn't want to back down from that. You know, and I felt like Starr did what she had to do. She went in the fire when King told her not to, and she still did it. Yeah. And she still stood her ground. Sometimes we have to do that in our communities. We can't let things go. So that was just my approach as a filmmaker. It could be different with other filmmakers, but that was my approach, honoring what Angie set up in the book.
And kind of in that vein, what did you leave the film with?
Oh, watching the film or making it?
Making it, or both.
Both. A whole lot. I left with a real appreciation for the way community grounds us, because there were really tough emotional moments in the process of filming, but what always kept us going and gave us levity was the community that we found in each other, and really allowing the space for each other to exist and treating each other as collaborators and family. And so keeping that joy alive in the midst of tackling really heavy themes was really important, and something that I feel like I really learned how to do in the process of making this. I took away a lot of reflection in terms of my own Black experience and my own dilemmas with code switching and feeling comfortable or not comfortable in a space. And I kind of felt like as Starr was learning how to stop compromising herself, I was learning how to stop compromising myself, and stop making myself smaller and stop changing the way I comported myself just because I was too much or not enough for people. I think that kind of gave me the foundation to start making the choice to not occupy spaces that make me feel like I can't fully be me. I learned a lot about, I guess, just maintaining joy in the face of adversity. I learned a lot about empathy, for sure, and I feel like in the process of actually sharing the film, I've learned that people have a whole lot more empathy than you would even believe, just because the responses that we get to the film are always so just authentic and from people's hearts, and they feel it really deep and want to express that with us. And I also learned that so many more people than I thought relate to these sort of experiences, whether it's code switching or even direct experiences with police brutality or just feeling like too much or not enough. Man, I learned so much. I don't know, I'm kind of pulling at strings here.
Oh, no, that was great. So now we're going to open it up to the audience to ask questions. The ushers will run the mics to you to ask those. So just raise your hands. And while we're passing the mic, let's just give another round of applause to George and Amandla.
I was wondering, this can be a question.
Could you stand up for us?
I I was wondering, this could be a question for Amandla or George. Why did you guys decide to cut out the storyline with Devonte? Because I felt like that was a really important part of Starr's character development, you know, learning how to deal with what happened to Khalil through another person.
Yeah, that was me. I cut it. I talked to Angie about it, and I just felt like he was only had a certain amount of time to tell a story. So I felt like I started thinking, if you have Devonte around, would that affect Seven? You know, just as an extra person, and then we went away for a little while in the store. So I just kept it in Starr's point of view and kept moving and kept pushing the story along. So that's the only compromise that we did, just take out Devonte.
I wrote my question down, so wait 1 second. I'm sorry, yeah, I just forget things. Yeah, so I said, okay, have there been any opportunities to use this film as a vehicle to bring law enforcement and communities together for a deeper conversation?
That's a great question. We've had some really interesting Q&As and conversations. We had one in DC with the Black Caucus, in which we talked about police brutality and ways to kind of use the film as a tool for empathy. I believe there's...
There was one that we did. We talked to the police officers in Florida. They had a convention in Florida, and many of them have shown the film to their police department as well. So hopefully, and also it's in many schools as well. So hopefully the film will continue to have a life where people will continue to see the film. And at the same time, we felt really good that the police department in many cities have been embracing the film and seeing things in a different light. So that's one of the things that we've felt really good about.
Yeah, there's also been a conversation around creating kind of a more condensed version of the film that could be an educational tool that would be showed to police departments or to schools. But a lot of teachers are even bringing their students out to see the film as an assignment, which is so cool and amazing. So yeah, there's been really amazing conversations. I like your hoodie.
First off, I want to thank y'all for spending your time here. It was really amazing of you. And as a future director, I would like to know, in spaces where it's tough and there's a lot of emotion, where do you place the camera so that it's not intrusive to your characters?
That's a very good question. Always felt like it's very important always to make sure whose point of view and what scene it is. Always, everything was always through Starr's point of view. In terms of emotion, I always try to find, by looking at the entire film, where do all these emotion goes? I always felt like Starr is very emotional. She cries, she gets upset, she gets angry. So how do you look at that and you make sure as a director you don't play the same beats so it doesn't become the same thing? It becomes flat at that same point. So then what is happening when you find out where the emotion is? And I always have my idea where the camera should be, but I usually let that go because when I see the emotion there in the rehearsals, I know exactly where I need to be. For Starr, it was always 3/4 close up where I could see her eyes because her eyes was always the truth. It was never profile. It was never behind. It was never low. It was always there with her, always handheld because I wanted to feel her emotion every moment where she was. So she was telling me that, and that's what a job as a director. One of the things what I try to do is always, to me, when I used to work on sets as a production assistant, I used to always see the director sitting behind a monitor. They sitting way away from the actors. And you don't really see anything. I always felt like let's get right next to the camera and you're looking right at the face. The monitor don't give you anything, the motion does. So that's one of the things that I think is true that I'll give my advice to you for your films. Okay.
Okay. There we go. This is for Amandla. As an aspiring actor, I know that you have two movies. You had two movies come out this year, so I was just wondering, when filming, like, did you
She
have
had 3 actually.
Oh, it's 3?
I know. I had to wait.
Oh, snap. So you had to wait. Okay. So I was just wondering, like, how were you able to balance all of that? Like, being in, like, did you have to go back and forth shooting different films, or was it all back to back to back? Like, how did it work?
It was pretty back to back, but I had 3 movies come out this year, but I filmed them all over the last few years, and they just happened to all come out at the same time. But yeah, it was pretty back to back. But I felt like each time I was on a set, it gave me so many more tools for the next one, which was so invaluable. I guess just, yeah, taking those tools and like grabbing onto them as much as you can and then applying them to the next environment. Was that helpful? Okay.
When, if ever, have you guys ever felt like Starr where you needed to stand up for something?
Oh man, I felt that way making this movie. Definitely, I felt like it was such a special opportunity to take something that I cared so deeply about. You know, because when the first kind of insurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement happened, there was rioting in my neighborhood, and my whole community felt that, and it was so painful, both physically in my community and around me, but also across the country, you know, for Black communities, and so when that first happened, you know, I remember protesting with my friends and getting out in the streets and trying to find some conduit through which to channel our anger. And so when I read Angie's book, I felt like it was a really incredible opportunity to kind of marry the act of protest with my job. And that's kind of everything that I want to do. And so I guess I felt like a time that I really wanted to stand up was the act of standing up against police brutality, and I felt like this was a really beautiful way that and it was a huge privilege to be able to do it in this way.
Yeah, I guess for us, I guess during the film, you know, we had an actor who was playing Chris. He did a good job. I felt good about the movie. I was 2 days away to deliver the director's cut, and then this guy said some of the worst racist things on YouTube. And then we had to ask ourselves as an artist, do we stand for that or not? So we stood up. We got to replace, and that was tough because we had to go back and shoot every Chris scene again, and it was already working. And we had to do some of the riots again. And she had to do all the emotion and get all the emotion where we needed to be, and I had to get all the shots the way it was sort of working. But we stood up, and we said we can't make that happen, and we endured that again. So that's just something that we believed in.
Well, thank you. But let's give Amandla and George one more round of applause for joining us today and putting together such a great film.
Thank you for staying the whole time.
I know. I wasn't paying attention.